Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Ivory trial event in which your Aravatar's Tusk is added to the game. Also, happy Independence Day everyone, for everyone who celebrates in America. So, as far as this event week, we have a lot of things going on, basically wrapping up, as next week is almost guaranteed to be the big 7.0 patch. So a lot of things are kind of wrapping up this week, so let's start getting into them. Let's start first with the new troop, which is slightly based off of the Mythic we get today on the standard pass for completing out the current campaign. But Aravatar's Tusk basically is a weaker version of the other thing, and the other thing's already kind of weak, but it's still situationally okay. As far as this thing, it deals some damage to an enemy boosted by its life at a 3-to-1. Unfortunately, 3-to-1 ratio, not particularly high, even at 1-to-1, not really doing too much. If the enemy dies, it ends up creating 8 death marks, or 8 death mark gems, and 8 skulls. So that'll end up blocking out. The problem with this is if you don't end up extra turning from the skulls, you're basically just giving the enemy a capability to go death mark your entire team. And while he does have immune to death mark himself, your rest of your team might not. And if this gets stunned, well, he's still going to get death marked. So overall, probably not going to get used, similar to many of the death mark mechanics that ended up coming out this season. It's unfortunately just not really that viable and backfires more than it's going to help you in most situations. Especially since you can't just match them immediately, since they're a neutral gem that cannot be matched. You simply have to destroy them, explode them, or similar related things. So, other things. Event key drop table is for Pridelands this week. As far as the overall drop table, if we go over to Pridelands over here and order them based on base rarity, we could end up seeing all of them and click show all if you don't already have them all. So, as far as event keys are concerned, the things that are not in drop table include the 4 faction troops, and oddly enough, I believe that's it. Just the 4 faction troops that are from the gosh, what's it called? The Iraji's Palace faction. Oh, sorry, also the Death Turret. Death Turret is in the Volkey drop table. So those 5 are not in drop table. Also Aravatar. How could I forget you? Aravatar is only in the Season Pass right now. However, next Pridelands event, it will be in drop table, though this Pridelands event, it is not, so do be wary of that. That does mean this place does have technically 4 mythics. Only 3 in drop table this week. Leo, Ubistet, and Umanif. This one will be in next time, but yeah, 4 of them is starting to get pretty high up there. But anyways, as far as event keys this week, should you open them? Not really. There's not really much here worthwhile. The only reason you might want to upgrade them, or obtain more of them, is oddly enough for what the kingdom can do now. Pridelands, as of today, is the second 30-star kingdom. I know both of these are 29. They aren't quite there yet, but they are technically 30-starable. Of course, most people will be blocked on the kingdom level, as the amount of deed books you need is absurdly high. They fixed this a little bit earlier this year, where they added merchants and angels, which allows you to get the deeds cheaper than they've ever been able to before. I'll also be able to farm them a little bit quicker, but it was a pretty minor change. Hopefully 7.0 and future changes will make these a little bit quicker to obtain, as the current rate of accumulation relative to how many you need is glacially slow. And yeah, hopefully it'll fix that into the future. But yeah, both of these are 30-starable, with Pridelands as of yesterday being 30-starable for the first time. And it's pretty relevant, as it is an attack-based kingdom. You do gain an additional +1 attack for getting up there. Technically 2. One for getting it to 30, but also another one for getting it to 20. Because doing this gives you 1 attack, and then getting it to 30-star also gives you a additional attack there for another kingdom bonus. But right now, if you can't end up doing that, you can at least get the extra tribute chance, which is kind of nice, just to make sure you get those little extra gems per hour. And it adds up over time. But yeah, second 30-star kingdom, right next to the other 30-star kingdom, oddly enough. Anyways, other than that, don't forget the Summer of Love event is still going on. This is, like many events right now, concluding by the end of this week. As far as how this goes, just use pure red teams, and same thing as last week. As far as rewards, you want to make sure to get the following. 1 Summer Armor. It's fully cosmetic, but we have no clue when it's going to return again, so make sure to get it. 1 Forenza. This will be available in the future. However, getting 1 copy of it, which technically gives you 3, will allow you to max it out and just get the Kingdom Star and everything else immediately. 6 copies of the pet. First 5 ends up maxing the pet, which also gives more bonus to Forenza. And a 6th one gives you a copy of the golden pet. The standard Forenza's flower will be available in the future. However, we don't know what will happen with the golden variants, as so far they've never returned as of currently. So if you want to get for collection purposes, do make sure to get that 6 times, 700 total, in order to get the 1 copy of the golden one. And of course, if you want to get its Orb of Power, while currently pretty useless super late in the game, as they haven't really been adding more ways to use these, it is pretty good if you still need to upgrade Zolgoth or Enrage Carandera to go get them, obtain them. You'll need 8 each, 16 total. And any beyond that is just hoping that 7.0 or any future update will end up using Orbs of Power and it's good to just have a stockpile just in case they ever have a, another Mythic to use it on, or like literally any feature that you can use them, because you do not want to use these on a trip. It is a complete waste of resources to do so. Anyways, aside from that, other events that we have going on that are concluding is, of course, the current campaign. The campaign Mythic, which we'll cover a video on soon. It's a pretty underwhelming one, but there are a few teams that aren't horrible with it. It deals a bunch of true damage to an enemy boosted by its life, and if the enemy dies, it explodes all Deathmark gems. And of course, it does have a way of creating Deathmark gems every single turn, so you're going to get an okay amount of explodes. You are realistically going to be constantly 4 times Deathmarking the entire enemy team, sometimes slightly too much, if anything. But it does have enough true damage in some circumstances if you have a correct HP buffer like Sacrorax or similar builds, where you can feed it enough HP where it will one-shot. You have to build a lot into this, like your entire team center around it in order to make it function. However, it does function to an okay degree. It's a pretty mid-tier Mythic, but it can still, function. Very rarely are you ever going to bring this out. You're never going to bring this out because it's going to be good. You're mostly just bringing it out because it's kind of usable. I don't really see much of a circumstance. Maybe underneath some situations when you're like brown restricted, but even then there's Iron Gut and other similar things that are likely going to do a similar role much, much better, but it's not horrible. It's another way to apply Deathmark if nothing else. And most things that apply Deathmark that depend entirely on the Deathmark, which this one pretty much does, even though it does have a true damage one-shot in some circumstances, it is primarily depending on the Deathmark, which is not ideal, and everything under that category. They're usable, but, you're up to the RNG of Deathmark. Does it kill, does it not kill? Sometimes it does, most of the time it doesn't. It's 10% per turn, and they generally cleanse it before it even secures a single kill, but, sometimes you get lucky. As far as the World event is concerned, we do have just Rarity Order. We also have both Skull damage and Spell damage, though you'll primarily be using the Spell damage. But yeah, just keep taking Rarity Order. By the time you hit 31 plus battles, you're just going to make sure you just don't take Aravatar's Tusk, and you'll be good to go. As far as teams, basically it's AoE spam. You have Thrall, you have Leprechaun. Put your best like AoE spammer in here. Here's the cheaper team, obviously, but put like Diamantina or any other big AoE that you have. Atlanta being the absolute cheapest. You get it for free from completing out the Divinian Fields questline. And Black Mana, who you get for free really early on in the game from leveling up your hero. And just put some really cheap mana accumulation around it, and you're good to go. And just put the best full AoE you have right there, and that'll be nice. Just anything that hits all enemies. And with the spell reduction, or spell amplification, you'll be good to go. And you do have access to mages, so you have access to a ton of things that hit all enemies. And you can even just type in all enemies, and pretty much any of these would probably be fine for the most part. Well, except for a few of them that actually aren't doing damage, but anything like Thalis, Atlanta, Diamantina, Elamagrim, Emeraldin, anything under those categories is going to be pretty strong for this event. So whatever you have that's the strongest option is what you'd want to put in that location there. And it's just Rarity Order as far as taking out the rooms. We did get a new Deep Delve, or not Deep Delve, that was last weekend. We got a new trial. We've been getting these quite often. I do feel like the team was slightly easier this time. Compared to what we had before. It doesn't look like it initially, but the team that we have, actually I can't even show it because I don't have the thing right here, but the team that we have is this, and overall it wasn't too bad. It seemed a little intimidating at first. You definitely can't go down the spell route. They hit you too hard to go down the spell damage route, so we end up having to go down the skull damage route. What you have for this is mostly Spirit Main and Second Claw Anher. And basically, he has a little bit of board control. You use this to keep countering their Sakima, which has a Skull Convert, and you basically want to use that as your 5th troop, because you don't have a Skull Spammer, you have to use the enemy Skull Spammer, and essentially you just keep using its 3x3 Destroy in order to make sure it never has alignment, and then you just utilize its Skull for a lot of value. The Ruby Giant just ends up tanking, and you can end up feeding an attack buff off of Second Claw, as it gives attack buff to everything above it. You have a Spirit Main, which attack buff itself, because it doubles the effect on any Rashka, which includes itself. Occasionally you might throw this all the way in the last slot if it looks like he might die soon, but otherwise you just throw it on himself so you have a really high attack damage there. You also get Enrage off the Ruby Giant, so you can sometimes just chain down their entire team off of attack buffs from the second Claw, and either one-shot them, two-shot them, and get them into that range. And Behemoth is basically just here for chip damage. It's one of the last things you'll cast on your team, but it does have a little bit of mana accumulation, and also allow them to chip damage them into range of being able to kill with Ruby Giant, or with Spirit Main in order to get them down to the exact range you need for a Skull Poke to kill them. So overall, it's not the worst one we've ever had. I would still say the worst one ever that we ever had was probably the Pan's Veil one. This one was definitely towards the harder side, but going down the attack route definitely makes it quite a bit easier. So if you haven't tried that yet, definitely try that for the trials, and might help out a little bit. Anyways, as far as other things we have going on this week, we have a few. So Tuesday, well actually that's today, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, I've been busy the last day for in preparation for Independence Day later today. But anyways, as far as the Faction Assault is concerned, it's for Draji's Palace. It's a red-purple restriction. Overall, pretty straightforward. Final battle, you basically, as far as pure faction, you basically spam the legend, so it's one of those kind of locations. Speaking about Independence Day, Wednesday, we're going to be getting the pet for that, so definitely make sure to get that, as we have no clue when this will return. Well, at some point, but do make sure to get it now, as it could be years before it comes back again. Wednesday, we're going to be having Thursday, we're going to be having the Sunspear class event. Sunspear, pretty good hero class. It has Freeze and Entangle on turn 1, which is pretty decent. Elementals, of course, can keep spamming that, but this immediately applies both from the start of battle. So it does have that going for it. The main reason you would ever use Sunspear these days, though, is for its perpetual Red Storm. It does Red Storm every single turn, as long as it's not stunned. And that's really good on, of course, any team that needs a lot of red. And as we can actually see right here, as the timer's already up, Bounty Hunter. We will be having Bounty Hunter. Meta isn't really changing, but, you know, another troop, another everything. So we'll be able to have that. We're also getting a new Mythic on Friday, too. This is one of the ones where we have it really deep into the month, because the last day of the month was a Friday. It's going to be the 7th day of this month, this Friday, so very deep. The deepest possible time we can end up getting the Mythic. So we'll have that to go over. It's pretty decent, too. It's a real mix of, like, Tina 9000 and Draculus and Eye of Argus, or whatever that was called, the one that creates, like, 2 Doom Skulls every single turn. It's a weird combination of all 3 of those, but it seems like it has potential. I don't think it's better than any one of those individually, but collectively it has, you know, all 3 of their abilities in a sense. So interesting to see how that pans out. Anyways, as far as Soulforge is concerned, not too much as far as Mythic's worth getting. If you were to craft one just because you want one, I would say it is probably, where to go? Quetzalma. Quetzalma has a little bit of a yellow loop, which very situational, but can be good. Also, sometimes if it ends up dying, it basically just revives with full mana, which is very strong if it was to trigger. Unfortunately, between stun and it just not triggering its 20%, it very rarely gets to utilize this. But when it does, it's insanely good value. It's one of the only few troops in the entire game that summons something with full mana upon death, and specifically itself. So it's like it can actually gain a buff in a sense, because if you didn't give any stat buffs into it or anything, it currently had like 12 out of 26 mana, and then it dies, and it comes back alive. It now has 26 out of 26. It basically has gained 14 mana for dying. So there are some situations where it gets a lot of value from this final trait, but also similar to Deathmark, just a lot of situations where just absolutely nothing, and it's like you don't even have the trait to begin with. So a bit of inconsistent in that regard, but it's pretty good at looping yellow, so any kind of objective where you have to do that, or you just want to build like a really heavy yellow team for whatever reason, in any kind of build where you're kind of restricted, it can be pretty good in those situations. But overall, pretty skippable for Mythics, I would say, this week. As far as weapons, there's something you definitely do not want to skip, and that is Rope Dart. Rope Dart is arguably the highest win rate weapon in the entire game, not to be confused with the highest usage rate, but it's really good at just not losing. It eliminates all armor from an enemy, and then deals a bunch of true damage to them and pulls them to the first position. If this was the only thing it did, it would probably be considered, you know, a decent weapon, but not one you would use a lot. However, there are several mechanics that make it absurd. The first one is, we'll wait till it comes up here. The first one is loading, entangle. So it gets to entangle the first enemy, and this does retroactively do it onto your target. So you end up shifting them into first and then entangling them. But more importantly, you get to destroy 3 gems in auto extra turn. So auto extra turn, insane. You get to just, you know, not lose your turn as long as you're not frozen, which allows you to immediately go get your extra turn back. You end up moving them to the first slot, so you can just immediately kill whatever you target as long as you don't have stealthy. You get the entangle on them, so even if you do give them a turn, they're not going to be able to do any skull damage. And even if they have a high mana, or, you know, you can just kill them before they do anything. You have auto extra turn, so the 3 red destroyed that would normally be considered kind of meh. Is actually kind of good, because it's basically just 3 free red mana, and since you're getting your auto extra turn, that 3 red destroy can potentially give you a new board. It might not seem like much, but, you know, you might get 3 red mana, you might get a 4 times out of it, that allows you to trigger one of your 4 times extra turn abilities, and you can end up getting a ton of value from this thing. And because of its entangle, it basically can invalidate almost all skulls onto the opposing team. As long as there's at least one thing on the opposing team that does not have immune to entangle, you simply just shift them to first slot, leave them there for a little while, and they basically don't have skulls anymore. And then you just go crazy from there. So yeah, it has a lot of potential. Also from the kingdom itself, you can synergize with Ubistet. Rope Dart, Ubistet, Rope Dart, Ubistet is a pretty decent double combo kill. It's one of the stronger ones in the game. It got nerfed a while back. It used to be a 4-to-1 boost ratio and now is a 6-to-1. However, with the attack increases over time, you know, the stats getting higher and higher. And technically today even higher, because you can now have Pridelands 2 higher than before. If we were to have all those red deeds, we'd have a 69 attack right now instead of 67. Nice. And of course we don't have that yet, but, you know, attack keeps going up over time, which keeps making Ubistet better and better. And with that, his damage range keeps getting stronger, and it allows Rope Dart, Ubistet to have a higher damage range. And of course, similarly, you just pair that with whatever mana accumulation combo you want, either Thrall, Leprechaun, or any other the billion combos that exist for mass mana accumulation. And yeah, use double kill, double kill. Pretty good for factions as well, where you're restricted in a way where you can end up getting away with that when you don't have better options available. Which, oddly enough, you can actually do for this faction because, of course, for the Ajraji's Palace, because it's red-purple. So you can actually go that exact team if you wanted to. I didn't show it for this, but you can go down that route, of course. But anyways, yeah, definitely get that. If you already have that and you want to find something else, Beastly Bow's okay. Very situational, but sometimes pure beast teams. If you're ever going to build a 4x beast team, this is generally the weapon you're going to be using with it for all the green-yellow. Synergize really well with those teams. Aside from that, the rest of it just for collection purposes for the most part. So it's mostly just Rope Dart and Beastly Bow, with Rope Dart being the super high priority that you do not want to leave this week with, if you can help it, if you don't already have it. Anyways, aside from that, let's go over the rest of the team. So, as far as all the teams for the week, let's go all the way from the top. All will be in the description below if you want to go copy-paste any of them. For the world event, we're going to be running just a pretty standard Diamantina team, just feeding it a ton of mana. We have Black Manacle here for two reasons. One is some chip damage to help Diamantina kill within its range. But the other thing is, we do have access to both spell damage and skull damage. So if it ever gets a Devour, you're going to have a really high attack value. You could end up replacing this with Elementals or any of the other tanky Barrier on Brown hero class if you find you're dying too much later on. And you can also synergize it with a little bit of a skull-related one in order to utilize your Devour if you so choose. But for the most part, we're just going all in mana with Archmages for the +3 purple, an extra one off of Thrall for +4, and we're just trying to feed everything. Since you are restricted to purple, Archmages does a lot of value. We're doing the exact same strategy for the lower rarity one. Kind of mentioned this one earlier, but it's basically Atlanta or whatever your strongest AoE is. There isn't really much of a need to deviate from this overall composition, as it just covers all your bases that you need. You get to utilize the skull damage, you have extra spell damage, you have your main killer, and you have all the mana you're ever going to need, with immediate mana off a Leprechaun, and Thrall filling in the rest. Next, we have ourselves Ajraji's Palace, which is a red-purple restriction, which takes place today. As far as teams, you're restricted to red-purple, though for this mode, you're allowed to use any colored weapon. So we're running our Skia Shield with Tesla, basically, for both of these, using Marilith as a quick mana accumulator in order to feed Tesla into Leprechaun. And for the later range, we end up just doubling up on the Tesla. Though, as I mentioned, you could run the Ubisoft team we mentioned earlier with the Rope Dart, or any of the other billion teams. Unfortunately, we can't use Iron Gut, but you can also go down single Zul'Goth build if you so choose as well. As far as pure faction, there are two main ways to build this: double Hellclaw into a double Ajrajit, or just triple Ajrajit into the Hellclaw Warrior. Hellclaw Warrior, while not having score reduction, does gain a lot of durability, gains a bunch of attack and life, and generally anything in Underworld for the pure faction that ends up gaining a attack plus a durability pretty much auto wins the entire faction. As long as this thing doesn't die and makes it to the final battle, gains a bunch of life and attack. This allows you to damage pressure to one-shot, as well as gaining durability to not die, and also gives you a red-purple storm, which helps out your team greatly. Aside from that, you might want to double up on this if you are dying a lot with it, if you find. Just double up on it, and as long as you have one Hellclaw Warrior with two Ajrajits going into the final battle, you should be perfectly fine. And as far as this guy, he's basically just a 4 damage poke. Nothing particularly special, nothing you'd really use outside the context of the faction. But inside the faction, you're going to have red-purple storm almost constantly, so you're going to have a lot of reds and purples on the board. This is a lot of damage pressure. You also have Burn Curse, which allows you to do double damage a little bit more consistently. This thing does have Pyromania, and Pyromania allows you to do 2 times skull damage to burning enemies. Combine that with all the attack gain, you're going to easily reach at a very quick pace the capability of just hitting everything for 2 times damage. And the fact that it has Curse and Burn means you could just bypass their immunity. So even if they have Impervious, you can still burn them. Meaning, essentially, actually, literally, because nothing in Underworld has immune to Curse. So everything in Soulforge, everything in Underworld, you will be able to do 2 times damage to with Pyromania due to the Curse Burn that this has access to. So you basically just take 2 extra turns, I'll Curse Burn the entire enemy team, as you'll have 3 individual ones every single time. So very high chance you'll end up burning, cursing them all with 2 extra turns. And then you just go crazy with the Hellclaw Warrior. And basically, Hellclaw Warrior is your entire carry. With this ability, just make it up for the last little bit of damage. But Hellclaw Warrior is doing probably 80-90% of the work overall as far as the pure faction is concerned, which is one reason for doubling up on it, as it is pretty much your entire team, or a good majority of it. Though doubling up on it does mean you're getting less curse and burn, so this is a more aggressive version, whereas doubling up on it's a lot safer. As far as the Sunspear class event, we're just going all in with a bunch of links. Generally a good strategy for Thursday events if you're only going for the gems, which generally you should only really go for because leaderboard is pretty underwhelming as far as that. As far as all the rewards, the gem to reward ratio is really bad on Thursday class events. But as far as just clearing out the free battles for the 25 gems and a little bit of EXP, just running a bunch of mana links into an AoE weapon tends to work out. You can use any blue AoE weapon. I just happen to have Dawnbringer here if you happen to have access to it, though any cheaper one would be perfectly fine. And this also gets a pretty high damage poke if you want to, but you're mostly just killing them out with your AoE weapon, in this case Dawnbringer. So as far as your trial event, we kind of already went over this earlier, but just to recap, go skull route, don't go spell route. I found that to be substantially easier. I was testing both, and it was substantially easier to just go down all in on skulls. Use Ruby Giant as your tank because of skull reduction. Use that to get your mana going. You keep casting Second Claw Enter to get everything with 2 attack buff. Spirit Main it casts on itself, and by the time you get down to it, you generally have like 300, 400 attack or something. And then you just keep chipping with that, kill them all out. Behemoth for a little bit of damage to get them into range. Backup mana accumulation. He's like the last thing on your team that you should cast. But you can stall your turn or clear up the board or get some mana accumulation for everyone else with it. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole strategy. Overall, not the hardest, but definitely towards the harder side of trials we've had so far. And as far as Bounty Hunter, pretty straightforward. Ogress, Tagraki Warrior, Corpse Mirror. Just go all in true damage with a mana accumulator. As Tagraki Warrior's main damage source. Corpse Mirror is for a little bit of control with a little bit of chip damage on the true damage. And of course, you use whatever the new Bounty Captain is this Friday, all the way in last slot. And it plays pretty much like every Bounty Hunter has for the all of time. So, same strategy, just different troop in last slot as per usual for a Bounty Hunter. But you do get some really good loot for it, so still worthwhile. Even if you just do the free battles, the loot you get from it's pretty insane. And of course, if you buy to like, what, tier 5 I believe it is, you can end up for 710 gems getting all the loot, which does give you some good guarantee major orbs if you want to try your luck on power orbs or any of the other good orbs. I'm not sure why I mentioned power orb as a good orb, but you know what I mean. Like the pet orb or the gold or silver glory orbs or anything like that. There's quite a few good things in the drop table if you end up getting lucky there. But anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful Independence Day. We will be, yeah, this is finally the final week of all the campaign and everything. Next week, likely exactly a week from today. Pretty much like 1 week and like 7 hours from now. Assuming it doesn't get delayed. It's not official, but it's almost guaranteed to be 1 week and... actually, I shouldn't say 7 hours from now by the time this video goes up. But 1 week from almost when this video goes up, we should be in version 7.0 potentially, so we have that to look forward to. And this week is basically just wrapping up every event that we have going on, the campaign, the summer event, everything else. So do make sure to go finish those out. Anyways, guys, have a wonderful Independence Day. I will catch you guys later. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful week. Goodbye, everyone.